Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wednesday Build. This is episode 1.39. And today we're going to be discussing the topic, a process of continuous improvement, assigning yourself homework on a schedule as a no-code developer, featuring David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, which I'm reading right now and I'm almost done with, by the way. So my name is Brittany Hernandez, and I am a lawyer, a professional no-code, low-code developer, a legal tech educator, and the global ambassador to law schools for Gavel, formerly Documate. So I am really excited to talk about this because it's something that I only started earlier this year. So in December of last year, I was thinking about how I wanted the next year to look and what we needed to do in order to help get the word out a little bit more about the different courses that I offer, as well as the program that I run for Gavel. So with this, I literally started from zero, from zero followers, zero videos, zero leads, and zero everything to try to figure out how I could kind of get into this space and become a thought leader and expert in this kind of no code development space, specifically with Gavel, but with other tools as well. And what I found to be the case over doing this for the past 9 months or so continuously and consistently, where I have assigned myself homework, you could say, which I'll go into deeper by having 2 videos minimum per week for the entire year. So the goal for me was to produce more content and to really through doing that, also become more of an expert in my particular tool set or tech stack, you could say. So I wanted to share with you kind of what I've done and how it was able to help me and some of the different ways that I go about finding and sourcing different assignments for myself, and how you might be able to add this into your schedule as well. And part of the reason why I bring up David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me, is not only because I have been listening to it nonstop for the past couple of days on Audible, which you can see here. I only have 19 minutes left. I loved this book so much, or love it so much. And it's really interesting because part of the reason why I started listening to it is I ran a Tough Mudder on Saturday, and I needed a little bit of motivation to help me like kind of get through it and to kind of, I felt like I had accomplished like the most amazing thing in the world, and doing a 15K when I hadn't really trained. I'd only just kind of been doing regular workouts and so on. And I had kind of heard of this book before. And it also kind of introduced me to the world of David Goggins, on YouTube and all of these different videos and stuff. And one of the things I came across that I thought was really interesting, that's not specifically in the book, but is in some of his other kind of other videos and things, is this idea of performing without purpose. And it's not about this idea that you go into something without having a goal or a purpose in mind as far as like, I want to get better, but instead he's just talking about how, and I actually am like, I'm hesitant to play this because he swears a lot. And I think that he has a good reason. He kind of explains why he uses a profanity, and he uses it kind of more strategically in a way to kind of emphasize the experience that he has gone through and like the severity of some of the things he's been through. But for this particular setting, it's not as useful, but I'll just point out that this is kind of where you can find where he talks about it, which is this idea that he kind of is just saying that you should do things even if you don't have something that you're specifically working towards. So it's more of a mentality of continuous improvement for the sake of yourself and finding your own limitations, and not actually to find the limitations, but to always be exceeding them, and to remove what's called the governor that he talks about in this kind of 40% rule, which I'll cover as well. But his whole thing here with this kind of perform without purpose is the idea that you're always training yourself for all of the different eventualities. And so that whenever something does happen, you are ready, rather than doing it in the reverse, which is like, I know something is coming and therefore I'm going to train, instead of being like, oh, well, nothing is coming, so I'm not going to train for something. And so in our kind of realm and space of no code development, this can look like making sure that you have a mastery of your tools and continuously improving and upskilling around those tools as well, things that integrate with those tools, even going into coding if you want, and kind of seeing how that can buffer your skill set from the no code space as well. So I think this is a really interesting concept that I wanted to explore further as well, because I find that it's hard to create urgency when you don't have something coming up, or you don't have a client project that you're working on, or you don't have something that you're building. So you have to generate that urgency within yourself. And so this kind of idea of Performing Without Purpose by David Goggins is really interesting to me, because is that idea that you're constantly striving for, your own capabilities and high performance for the sake of performing as an individual and reaching your full potential, rather than always just training for something specifically. So I think that's a really helpful concept here. And I kind of like the idea of taking this concept of performing without purpose and combining it with Atomic Habits. So Atomic Habits is a book by James Clear, which I really highly recommend. It's one of the books that changed my life the most. And I was able to kind of institute a lot of the teachings from this book, and it made it to where I was able to really accomplish a lot more than I thought possible in like the past 2 years or so. So it looks like this. As I mentioned, this one's really about how we can combine the concepts from David Goggins' book and his kind of his idea and concept around performing without purpose, combining that with Atomic Habits and putting those two things together, because he talks about how like motivation is garbage for getting anything done. And the same kind of concept comes into play within Atomic Habits, which is that enthusiasm will go away and your motivation will not be there all the time, and feelings go up and down. But if you design your environment and you design your habits to be those that actually are going to produce excellence no matter what, because of the way you've set them up, then you can get past those days where you're not feeling like it. So for example, in my own experience, how I assign myself homework and make it to where I have this process of continuous improvement is that I've said that every single Tuesday, I will come up with a new solution, to a problem that is asked either in the community or that I found in the tools that I use and that I want to be seen as an expert in. And I want to be an expert in myself as well. So that every Tuesday I produce a new video that covers some aspect of a tool that I use and share that with the community so that they can also improve as well. But in doing so and making it so that it's on the calendar that every single Tuesday, this is something that I do, as well as a second piece, which is that every single Wednesday at this specific time, I'm going to be talking about something. What this does is it actually turns on my subconscious to tell myself that I need to look for new problems to solve all the time. So there's a system that I've triggered and that's running in the background all the time as I'm walking around, as I'm making dinner, as I'm putting things together, because I put it on my calendar that I better have something to say by Tuesday and Wednesday of every week. It's turned my mind on to always look for things that I don't know and seek them out so that I can learn and share. The other piece of that is the idea around sharing. Sometimes people will hoard knowledge, but I think that that's actually counterproductive, because you're going to actually be able to master the subject even more because of trying to explain it to someone else. And what happens as well is you create this reciprocity within, in the community that you're in, that when someone else comes up with a solution to a question you've posed, that they would be more willing to share with you as you've been willing to share with them. So I think that that's a really helpful process as well, as you get to master parts of the subject, they're mastering parts of the subject, and you share information that way. So that also brings up another point, which is around the idea of how to source your new assignments. So one of the things that I do, which is available and free and open to anyone who's in the community as well, is the Slack group for the Gavel community is ripe with new questions all the time. So I get to see what people are struggling with. I get to find and come up with solutions that I can share with them. And then that gives me an assignment, is to go through and see what questions are being asked, which ones are being asked multiple times, which ones aren't getting solved right away, meaning that somebody doesn't know the answer right away. How often are the same or similar types of patterns coming up, so that I can address that for people. So you can source new assignments for yourself from within the communities that you're in for whatever tools you use the most. Some people use tools like Softer or Zapier, or a combination of these different pieces, Clio, Notion. People will use some that I don't use as much, but other people use a lot in the kind of no-code community, or things like a Bubble, and so on. So you can kind of see how you can find plenty of different assignments for yourself by going through and doing these different pieces. One of the things you can do as well is to take additional courses. So for example, right now, I'm actually in the LaTeX Builder course that is put on by LaTeX UK. So every Thursday at 10 a.m., I am sitting in a kind of virtual classroom with several other people, where for 3 hours on Thursdays, we go through and we have a guest who talks to us through different aspects of the legal tech ecosystem within the UK, the opportunities, how to start how to found a startup, how to get investment, how to find co-founders, how to do all of these different pieces. And even though I'm not specifically building a particular, product right now, I still felt like it was good timing for me to continue to upskill and learn, even if I'm not specifically building out a startup right now. I still think that the knowledge and the ability, since it's a free 10-week program, to be a part of that is really, really valuable, especially also any connections that you make and network that you build from getting to do these different pieces will always be helpful in the future. So one of the things that I have done as well with a process of continuous improvement is seeking out a coach or mentor, or a tutor. So one of the things that I did was I actually reached out to someone else first, because I knew him personally a little bit better, and knew that he had done a particular project. So I was trying to learn around like a little bit more about APIs and integrations and how to build custom ones. So that person was actually not able to really help me. So I was able to find someone else who was, and we got along really well, and we were able to kind of collaborate and like learn from each other. And he was teaching me, and I paid him to teach me how to do very specific things, because I recognized that there was a gap in my knowledge in a particular area. And I want to not be the one who knows like everything, but I want to have the ability to answer questions about sort of all of these different pieces, especially if I'm holding myself out as somebody who certifies other people in this platform, then I need to be someone who knows a broad range of things. And so anything that I see on the table that is something that I'm not as good at, then I need to fill that gap with knowledge from somebody who already knows how to do that. And they can save time for me by I can just pay them to share their knowledge with me, rather than, not having the humility to ask for help. So that's one of the things that is a big barrier to continuous improvement, is hubris. So this idea that you know everything and you can do everything yourself will get you to waste a lot of time. So one of the things that you can do is reach out for help and find a tutor, for example. So these kinds of concepts are really helpful in this idea of maintaining a mentality of continuous improvement and not resting on your laurels. And that kind of leads me to another book that I wanted to mention, which is one that I got in the mail recently from Dean Graziosi. So I purchased his course called Launchpad after a big event that was on around coaching and things like that. So he has a book called The Underdog Advantage, which looks like this. And this one's really good. I'm reading this one, and this morning I was actually reading something that's kind of relevant to our conversation today, which is around maintaining the mindset of an underdog. Because sometimes when you have accomplished quite a lot and you've become, let's say, an expert in your field, it can be easier to just be like, I know enough. I don't have to keep learning. I can just, sit back and, if anything new comes up, like I'll hear about it in the newsletter. And instead, he says, and he's a millionaire and he came from a kind of a tougher background, but he has kind of made himself literally a self-made millionaire. So he says the privileged have a hard time improving. Once you're at the top of your game, how do you go up? There's a reason that so few sports teams repeat in championships. Once they win, they aren't hungry anymore and they rest on their laurels. They don't dive deep and keep improving. That's why teams like the Golden State Warriors and New England Patriots are so remarkable, because they are the rare exception of champions who keep their underdog mindset alive even after holding that trophy high in the air year after year. It's hard to improve when you are the best. How do you know who to measure yourself against? What do you use as your fuel when you are already at the top? So I think that's a really interesting point. I think there was another one I wanted to highlight, which is he talks about Tiffany Haddish as well. So he says, like, for this section, it's called Underdogs Can Take Action, Learn from It, and Improve Rapidly. And that underdogs can be humble learners and use that to propel themselves to success. And his favorite example are comedians like Tiffany Haddish, who is a huge star, who, her tour packs venues around the country months in advance. She's an in-demand movie star who gets millions to be in a movie, et cetera, et cetera. But how does she develop her comedy material? What she does is she actually shows up to open mics at tiny no-name comedy clubs without announcing herself to the audience and gets up and does her experimental bits. So the person who gets paid huge money to headline a comedy, she is appearing for free next to a bunch of amateurs with only a few dozen people in the audience. And because she wants to be able to have the freedom to experiment. So what she's done is she's humbled herself. She goes in front of regular people, smaller crowds, to try new things. And if it bombs, it bombs. If she screws up the delivery, she's learning something. If she gets the timing wrong, or if she gets booed. There's also a really, really good documentary on Jerry Seinfeld that's on Netflix. I think it's just called Seinfeld, but oops, let me see. Might not be logged in. Yeah. Let me see if I can just find. No, I think it's just called Comedian. Yeah, I believe it's just called Comedian. Yeah. This is the one. This is on Netflix, I believe. I'm not sure if it's no longer there, but this is a really interesting documentary, not just about Jerry Seinfeld as the person, but also about what it's like to be a comedian when you're developing material. It's from 2002, but it's super fabulous because what he shows is like what he decided to do was he decided to retire all of his material and start completely from scratch. So he also has a book out. It's called Is This Anything? And that has like all of his jokes from like all over the years, from all of his years as a comedian. But at this particular point in this particular documentary, what he's showing is that he retired his material that he was doing before that all killed and, was great. But he wanted the challenge of starting with a completely new set and building it up from scratch. And so in this documentary, he's getting followed around by the camera and showing as he's slowly and consistently going out night after night after night, sometimes multiple comedy places in a row in order to develop material. And there's actually this really interesting part in the documentary where he's testing out some new material in front of a crowd. And obviously he's like this nearly a billionaire comedian who has one of the most successful TV shows of all time, or sitcoms or whatever. And so for him to kind of stand up there, he has a reputation and people expect him to be good. And when he got up there, he forgot one of his new jokes. And someone in the audience, a heckler, says, "Is this your first time?" And he kind of looks at her and he's like, he was just kind of like takes a pause. He wasn't like angry or something, but he was just like, this is how comedians develop their material, is that we start from nothing, we forget, we try. And I just think that moment was really interesting. So I highly recommend watching this one. But yeah, so kind of in a combination and wrap up of all of these different pieces, and from The Underdog Advantage, and from David Goggins' book, and from Comedian, and from all these different pieces, Atomic Habits as well. Excuse me. Yeah. What we can see is this pattern of humility, the ability to continuously have a mindset of improvement and challenging yourself, even if there isn't some specific goal at the end, that you're not like working towards, a particular product necessarily, but that you are constantly trying to improve as a person so that you can reach your full potential as whatever you are. One of the other things that David Goggins has in his book around a challenge is that if you have kind of like reached a peak in one area of your life, that you should try to experiment in other areas and diversify your expertise. So let's say you're the best lawyer in California, maybe try like learning a new language, or seeing if you can play a new sport, or just like constantly challenging yourself in different ways, which I think is really important. One of the things as well is the idea of a physical challenge that helps with your mindset. So doing something like I did, with which is a 15K, for example, where I kind of like got to climb over things that were really scary. I got over my fear of getting into cold water, those kinds of things, and always kind of putting yourself in a state of discomfort in your discomfort zone makes it to where you're constantly in that mental state of continuous improvement. So I think that those are all really, really important. So let me just double check my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to share with you. There's also something about like practical learning and staying in the kind of like on the ground, you could say. So the reason I kind of put this point is because of the fact that I've learned the most when I was actually dealing with live client projects. And it's hard because my preference is to work behind the scenes quietly without lots of emails and client interaction. Actually, I would prefer to just like be given the project and not have to deal with like collecting the money, finding new clients, like talking to them on the phone and emailing back and forth. And I think it's mostly because I'm very protective of my calm and mental state, because I get anxiety quite easily. So it's for me, it's a little bit better to just kind of have someone be like, here's the project, please build it, and then I can deliver it back and forget all of the other stuff and have someone else deal with that. But what I've done kind of lately is, because I understand that I am that way, I kind of have shied away from like taking on new projects and clients. But I found that I can only progress so far without getting the different use cases into mind of what people are trying to do with the tool. So one of the things that I can do to get around that is take on new clients. But if I don't necessarily only want to do that, I can also look at what features are being suggested. I can look at what and trying to find like workarounds for those. That's one way I can stimulate my mind into assigning homework, like we talked about, going into the community and trying to find new problems to solve, and so on. So those are a couple of ideas as well. One of the things you can do that is kind of mentioned in David Goggins' book as well is this kind of live autopsy audit type of thing, where he also does. So basically he's saying like, when you die, people will do an autopsy to determine the cause of death. And for you can do a live autopsy where you go through and you evaluate kind of what things you need to improve in your life in order to kind of reach your full potential and so on. He also does something called an AAR, which is from the military term meaning after action report. So let's say, for example, you've worked on something and you failed at some parts. He goes through and says, first focus on like the things you did well and the successes, but also kind of break it down into different pieces that show you and write out what you could have done better. And he goes through this when he talks about how he was able to beat the Guinness World Record for the number of pull-ups in 24 hours. And it's over 4,000. I think it's like 4,030 pull-ups in 24 hours, which is just insane. But he tried it 2 times before the third time he actually was able to complete it. And in those first 2, he kind of evaluated what he did incorrectly and how he could have done better. And with that is that he also really focuses on this idea of confronting reality, and to kind of take the time to do that self-audit And also he has like he has you pull this idea of like having a bucket of failures and also just like insecurities, and recognizing it as an objective sort of truth that you can then pull out one at a time and improve one thing at a time. So you can kind of apply this not only just into your life, but also into each aspect of your business and development, for example, and say like, which pieces am I avoiding and I'm afraid of because I'm a little bit insecure about them? What can I do to kind of pull them out one at a time and look at them objectively, do a little bit of an audit and say like, okay, in the past, why am I resistant to this particular thing? What's causing me to be afraid of confronting this particular thing? In my own case, for example, I'm procrastinating on a project because there's a part where I'm a little bit unsure of the best way forward. And so I need to just kind of like do this objective audit to say and then pull it out and look at it and say like, why am I afraid of this? Why am I resistant and hesitant to move forward on this project? And I think in my head right now, I haven't really sat down to take the time. I just keep avoiding it. And I think part of it is that I am doing it as part of a course. And so I don't want to be wrong and teach somebody the wrong thing. And also it takes a lot of energy and time to record them. So if I do it incorrectly, then I have to go back and re-record and kind of undo everything. It just seems like a lot of time and energy around it that I don't feel like I have for it. So I think one of the things is the idea of I need to just kind of get my hands dirty, do the work, pull it out, kind of evaluate it, do that live autopsy and audit it, and then learn and fill whatever gaps in knowledge that I need in order to come up with the best solution for that problem. So that's one of the things I've learned as well recently. Okay, so we've kind of gone over most of the things I wanted to talk about. What do I have here? Oh, and on the idea of like filling in your knowledge gaps, there's this really cool part of an interview he has on this idea of this impact theory one. I couldn't find exactly the part where he says this. Maybe we can.
Different minds.
He has like this thing he says that I really like. He talks about how like when he was doing the ASVAB, he wasn't good at studying, and he kind of like has this idea of like, instead of pretending that you are super smart and that you don't have any problems and whatever else, he says like, no, I'm not smart, and roger that. Like if I'm not smart, then I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to fill in those gaps in my knowledge. So I'm hoping
a great chance. I may not be in the middle. Like I was in for 21 years. I'm so bad from having stress. I am. You have to live. I'm introvert. Be that person on that door.
Again.
You don't know me, son.
He says something.
My mom is this way. My stepdad got murdered. My dad beat the shit out of me. I can't read and write to save my fucking soul. I've lied about it to everybody. I've cheated on all these tests. And then you put a goal in your mind. How are you gonna feel, man, when you accomplish this goal coming from that shit? Coming from the fucking hell you came from.
I know there's a lot of profanity, but I, like I said, he does have like a good sort of, I think like a good reason to for his, obviously I don't actually swear myself, but I don't know like if the audience is really cool with it or not, but I think I highly recommend watching this, even if if you can get over that point, because he has this. Yeah, so he has this part here where he kind of, I think it's around here anyway, where he kind of talks about how like he wasn't smart, he had to cheat in school, he has a learning disability, and I just liked this one part where he says like, okay, I'm not smart, roger that. I'm going to go ahead and find out every other thing that I need to do in order to get over that particular point in my life. So anyway, if you can find this part, then I think it's actually right here. Hopefully it was fine.
Here, where my weakness is in learning. All right, man, how am I going to do this? And I figured out a way to do it.
Yeah, this is it.
I'm not going to learn like you. Shit. intelligent. I want to be smarter. This is crazy. No, you take off the first one. I want to be smart. I got a focal point.
Yeah,
You can't look at this
all this
gigantic
idea about
list
this
and say,
focal
I change
point.
all this shit. My God. For me, that was my thing. I have to become more intelligent. I have such a severe learning disability, man. I can't retain shit. I had to now get that one thing and then strategize in that one problem. How can I do this? I'm not going to learn like you. I'm not going to learn like anybody else. How am I going to figure this out?
Right. So he has to go through and figure out for himself how he's going to do it. He went through and audited himself and said, these are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. All right, I'm going to find a way to do it. So what he does is actually he finds out a way to he gets like the manual that they have to learn like 18 months in advance, and he writes it out longhand by like pen and paper. He rewrites the whole manual in order to learn it.
I realized, hang on a second, I'm not smart. How can I get past this? How can I get through this obstacle? I need to acquire this book 18 months in advance.
Right. So he kind of strategizes around his weaknesses. He understands himself. He understands his weaknesses. And then he says, okay, roger that. I'm going to go through and strategize how I can go through this problem and not have to, live in this state of mediocrity. Instead, I'm going to push myself and
these
find
are
a way
those
through.
rhombohedron.
So anyway, so that's a really good section, this idea about the focal point. So I highly recommend watching kind of this section. And he says how like we have all these people around us who says like, that, oh, it's okay that you're like struggling with this. And he's like, forget that. I'm just going to find my way through. So that's something that we can kind of take away from this as well and have a mindset around that kind of live autopsy and personal audit to say like, okay, I'm weak in this thing. I have some resistance towards learning or doing this particular piece of whatever I'm trying to do. Let's pull that out, take a look at it and see how I can strategize objectively rather than emotionally through that problem in order to kind of get past it. So I've just learned so much from reading this book. I've just been literally consuming it as fast as I can over the past few days. And I think it's like, I can't remember how many hours this book is in total, but when you're listening to it, 13 hours and 37 minutes. And I literally started it like a couple days ago and I have 19 minutes left because I was just like, I had it on 1.5 times because I like to listen to it a little bit faster. And then I kind of put it down to 1.2 because I really wanted to digest it and not just kind of whiz through it. But I really wanted to get like a whole broad overview as much and as quickly as possible. And look at this, it's like 193,000 ratings and it's got a 4.9. It's like literally that good. Anyway, so that's kind of it for today. I wanted to just share this idea of how we can take all of those ideas of how we can continuously improve, how we can keep a mindset of training without a purpose where it doesn't have to have some specific thing at the end in order for us to continuously improve, how we can also continue to have an underdog mindset and kind of remember to experiment and try different things and not be afraid, but also to put those pieces together into a schedule that allows you to kind of harness the ideas behind Atomic Habits, to put it on your calendar that on Tuesdays every week, I am coming up with a new video, a solution to a problem that's something that I found that was surprising and I didn't know before, or something that answers a question in the community that I'm in, that helps me to share the knowledge and teach the knowledge that I have with others and kind of lift all of us up. And then also that that we can kind of push through, put it on our calendars, and that having it on our calendars that on this day at this time, for example, for this Wednesday build episode, and for every week for the past 39 times, I've always had it to where on Wednesday at this time, even if I'm traveling, I'll still try to make it live, or I'll plan to have it pre-recorded and then posted on that day. But that idea that we're constantly finding ways to improve and assigning ourselves homework each week to up level our skill set, I think is really important. And you can do this as no code developer or just in your regular life, even if you're not. So that is all for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I will give you my contact information in a moment. It's been really fun to kind of chat through these ideas with you. And I'm going to be going through just a few announcements before we wrap up, which are that this has been an episode of the Wednesday Build, which has new episodes live every Wednesday because that's on my calendar to continuously improve and to trigger that subconscious mind of kind of always looking for new things to talk about. Code Word Hex is my weekly assignment to myself, my weekly homework, and have new issues out every Tuesday. I also have the Tuesday Forecast, which is a free weekly newsletter that lets everyone know about what's coming up. I also offer Gavel certification courses and courses in software and Airtable, Go Full Page with more to come. We also have a community called Chromium Global, and I mentioned the Gavel Slack community if you'd like to join us there as well. So thank you so much for those of you that are here with me live, and for those of you that are on the recording, hello. And we're going to be talking next Wednesday, the 4th of October at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Considerations when investing in a tech stack, when to start spending, why, and on what. So this is going to be a really fun one where I'm going to dive into what I think about and what I consider before I invest in different tech and adopting it as part of my stack. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or via email at brittany@chromium.pro. And then for any inquiries that are specifically related to Gavel's law school program, you can just email me at brittany@gavel.io. So that is all for today. Thank you again for being here, and I will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.